Hi and welcome. I'm Andy Mioch and you are watching A News. Here are the headlines. Donald Trump says he and Vladimir Putin agreed to begin negotiations on ending the war in Ukraine immediately. Benjamin Netanyahu says ceasefire in Gaza ends if Hamas does not return hostages on Saturday. Talks on a coalition government led by the far right in Austria collapse. We examine what's behind the far right's resurgence in Europe. Thank you for tuning in. US President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin agreed to start negotiations on ending the war in Ukraine immediately, Trump said on his Truth social media. Saying that he had a lengthy and highly productive phone call with Putin, Trump said he will call Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and inform him on the conversation. He added that Secretary of State Marco Rubio, CIA Chief John Ratcliffe, his National Security Advisor Michael Waltz, and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff will lead the American negotiating team. He concluded by saying the effort will lead to a successful conclusion. There's no time to waste in ramping up defense production, NATO Secretary General said, kicking off the two-day ministerial meeting of the alliance. Defense spending is expected to be high on the agenda. William Denslow brings more on that from Brussels.
NATO's Secretary-General Mark Rutte has held a press conference kicking off this two-day defence ministers meeting here in Brussels, where he laid out the key priorities that we'll see at this summit. Now, defence spending is set to be a key theme of the event. That is not surprising, considering the fact that consistently Donald Trump has complained that fellow NATO members are not spending enough on defence. Donald Trump has said he wants to see NATO allies spend upwards of around 5% of annual GDP on defence, up from the current NATO benchmark of 2%. Mark Rutte, the Secretary General, agrees with Donald Trump on that point, that more needs to be done on defence spending. Later this year, he'll unveil a new benchmark on how much he wants to see NATO members spending on that issue. He says that the EU, European members of NATO and Canada need to invest substantially more, but he does say some progress has been made. He says there's been a 20% increase in their spending in 2024 compared to 2023, but says much more is needed. Also on the docket during this summit, production. Europe has said that it must scale up its defensive industrial base, so that'll be another topic of discussion, and of course support for Ukraine. The message from Mark Rutte, very simply indeed. He says that Ukraine must get stronger on the battlefield, and that will give them a stronger position when they reach the negotiating table with Russia in the future. William Denslow, A News, Brussels.
Earlier today, U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth said that return to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is unrealistic during his first visit to NATO headquarters. Speaking to the Ukraine Defense Contact Group, he also said the U.S. does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is realistic. For more on that, we go to Washington and our Ubay Shabander.
In his first meeting with the Ukraine Defense Contact Group with Western allies in Brussels, U.S. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth outlined President Trump's approach to ending the ongoing war in Ukraine. Secretary Hegseth said that Europe is at a critical moment as the Ukraine war approaches its third year. The message from Washington to Europe is that this war must come to an end, and ensuring an enduring peace through diplomacy is a top priority for President Trump, according to his Secretary of Defense. Now, Secretary Hegseth said that the war can only be ended by, quote, coupling allied strength with realistic assessments of the battlefield. And that means recognizing that returning to Ukraine's pre-2014 borders is an unrealistic objective, according to Hegseth. The Secretary of Defense outlined the American position that supporting a sovereign and prosperous Ukraine will require robust security guarantees to ensure that the war will not begin again following a negotiated settlement. Secretary Hegseth added that the United States does not believe that NATO membership for Ukraine is a realistic outcome for any negotiated agreement, and the U.S. will not send peacekeepers to Ukraine. When it comes to European defense spending, Hegseth said that President Trump is calling for NATO member states to increase the percentage of their GDP spent on defense to at least 5%, up from the current goal of 2%. Hegseth stressed that safeguarding European security must be a European priority, and this must include expanding European defense industrial base and leveling with European citizens on the threat facing Europe. The American Secretary of Defense cautioned European allies that stark strategic realities prevent the U.S. from being primarily focused on European security, as the United States seeks to focus on protecting its own borders and preparing its military readiness for competition with China in the Pacific. I'm Ubesh Bander here in Washington, D.C., A News.
Staying in Washington, Donald Trump ordered federal agencies to work closely with his advisor Elon Musk to shrink the workforce by identifying employees who can be laid off. Trump and Musk once again took aim at USAID, calling the foreign aid agency corrupt and ineffective.
Speaking at the White House, Elon Musk, who now oversees U.S. government efficiency, questioned USAID's impact, claiming it interferes in elections.
I think that there are some worthy things, but overall, if you say what was the bang for the buck, I would say it was not very good. And there was far too much of what USAID was doing was influencing elections in ways that I think were dubious and do not stand the light of day.
President Donald Trump went further, calling USAID corrupt and pledging stricter oversight.
The USAID is really corrupt. I'll tell you, it's corrupt. It's incompetent, and it's really corrupt. And I can't imagine a judge saying, well, it may be corrupt, but you don't have the right. You got elected to look over the country and to, as we say, make America great again, but you don't have the right to go and look and see whether or not things are right that they're paying or that things are honest that they're paying.
The remarks have sparked backlash, with pro-foreign aid advocates accusing the administration of undermining critical humanitarian efforts. Following Trump's order, USAID staff were placed on leave and its website went offline. Secretary of State Marco Rubio has been appointed acting administrator. Trump says the cuts have already uncovered massive fraud.
We have massive amounts of fraud that we caught. I think we probably caught way over a lot of billions of dollars already in, 2 weeks?
With Musk at his side, Trump has now ordered federal agencies to prepare for large-scale staff reductions, signaling further shakeups in Washington.
The U.S. president once again floated his U.S. ownership of the Gaza Strip plan, sitting beside Jordan's King Abdullah II ahead of their meeting in the White House. Jordan's king said that Arab leaders will wait for Egypt's proposal on the future of Gaza.
U.S. President Donald Trump and Jordan's King Abdullah met in the Oval Office on Tuesday to discuss Middle East stability and humanitarian concerns. While Trump reiterated his proposals to rebuild Gaza, King Abdullah announced that Jordan will reveal its own plans for the Strip. He also said that the Arab consultations are continuing, mentioning an upcoming meeting in Riyadh, and announced his country's plan to take 2,000 critically ill children from Gaza.
I think the point is how do we make this work in a way that is good for everybody? Right. Obviously, we have to look at the best interests of the United States, of the people in the region, especially to my people of Jordan. And we're going to have some interesting discussions today. I think one of the things that we can do right away is take 2,000 children that are either cancer children or in a very ill state to Jordan as quickly as possible. And then wait for, I think, the Egyptians to present their plan on how we can work with the president to work on the Gaza challenges.
Trump, however, insisted that the U.S. would have Gaza and relocate its population, suggesting land in Jordan and Egypt as alternatives.
Really a beautiful gesture.
He dismissed concerns over Palestinian resistance, calling it a war-torn area that the US would redevelop.
And with the United States being in control of that piece of land, a fairly large piece of land, you're going to have stability in the Middle East for the first time. And the Palestinians, or the people that live now in Gaza, will be living beautifully in another location. They're going to be living safely. They're not going to be killed, murdered, and having to leave every 10 years, because I've been watching this for so many years. It's nothing but trouble.
Trump maintained that Jordan and Egypt would eventually agree to host displaced Gazans, noting both countries depend on US economic and military aid. While Jordan remains a key US ally, Abdullah avoided commitments, emphasizing that Arab leaders would wait for Egypt's proposal before taking a position.
Following Trump's proposal to displace Palestinians from Gaza, Egypt will host an emergency Arab summit on February 27th. Meanwhile, Arab leaders are warning that Trump's idea could shatter an already fragile ceasefire.
U.S. President Donald Trump's proposal to take control of Gaza was met with sharp criticism from Arab leaders, who believe it threatens regional stability and could derail a fragile ceasefire. Speaking at the World Government Summit in Dubai, Arab League Secretary General Ahmed Abul-Gheit warned of dire consequences.
You have a problem from today until next Saturday, which is the continuation of the ceasefire and the implementation of the exchange of hostages and prisoners. This is something essential that everyone must work towards in order to enable continuation, because if there is a military explosion of the situation again, all this effort will be disrupted.
Meanwhile, Gulf Cooperation Council Secretary General Jassim El-Boudawi emphasized the importance of maintaining strong U.S.-Arab ties, adding that both sides must voice their opinions for meaningful dialogue.
I think the American side still realizes the importance of the security and stability of the region. I think the American side still knows the importance of the Arab world to it and its relations and strategic alliances with many Arab countries, including the Gulf countries. I still think the American side is a mediator, perhaps with a different approach, perhaps in a different way, as mediator, but it's not a party.
In response to the crisis, Egypt will host an emergency Arab summit on February 27th to discuss the latest developments.
Egypt and Qatar are intensifying diplomatic efforts to salvage the Gaza ceasefire agreement ahead of the Saturday deadline set by Israel's Prime Minister. Benjamin Netanyahu said that if Hamas does not release hostages, the fighting will resume. Giles Gibbons reports from Tel Aviv.
Behind the scenes, mediators between Israel and Hamas are working very hard to try to get this ceasefire back on track. According to reports, both Qatar and Egypt working intensively to try to bridge the gap between Israel and Hamas. Of course, one of the other key mediators in this entire peace process is the US. And US President Donald Trump, during a meeting with Jordan's King Abdullah at the White House on Tuesday, said that he doesn't think that Hamas are going to make the deadline in terms of handing over hostages by Saturday, also accusing the group of playing tough guy. There is also some room for interpretation, some room for maneuver in the message that Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli Prime Minister, sent to Hamas late on Tuesday, local time here in Israel. The words that he used were that Hamas should return our hostages by Saturday noon. There's a lot of focus on that word "our" in that sentence. Is he saying that he backs up US President Donald Trump's suggestion that all of the remaining Israeli hostages held by Hamas in Gaza should be released on Saturday? Or would it be enough, just 3 hostages, as was initially planned, to keep the ceasefire deal alive and to keep phase 1 still going? In terms of Hamas's response, well, they have said that they remain committed to the ceasefire agreement. And remember, initially they said, when they announced that they were delaying this planned hostage release on Saturday, they said that they were doing so because they believe that Israel is violating the terms of the deal, in particular delaying the return of Palestinians to the northern part of Gaza, as well as delaying the influx of humanitarian aid into the enclave. Those are two allegations that the Israelis strongly deny, but that is really the area where experts believe there could be some sort of a deal, that Israel could make assurances around the influx of humanitarian aid and the movement of Palestinians around the enclave in order for Hamas to release hostages on Saturday and keep this deal alive. Giles Gibson for A News, Tel Aviv.
As diplomacy is trying to save the ceasefire, dozens of aid trucks are stuck, waiting to enter Gaza. Drivers say they are stranded in Egypt, not far from the Rafah crossing into the enclave.
Aid trucks filled with tents and supplies are piling up in Egypt's city of Arish, near the Rafah border. It comes as political tensions between Hamas and Israel continue to derail efforts to deliver crucial assistance to Gaza. Jordanian truck driver Ahmed Hussein says he's been waiting for nearly a month to deliver his goods.
We arrived almost a month ago with tents for Gaza, but no aid has been allowed in. Most trucks are sent back from the Rafah crossing, and only a few get through. The claim that 200 or 300 trucks are entering daily is false. We are stuck here in Arish with no support from the Red Crescent or customs. It's a political decision, and we are just waiting for relief.
Hamas has announced it would halt the release of Israeli hostages because it claims Israel is blocking vital humanitarian aid during the ceasefire deal which began on the 19th of January. However, Israel denies this accusation and says it's fulfilling its obligations, claiming 600 aid trucks enter Gaza daily, carrying food, water, medical supplies and shelter items. Aid groups report increased humanitarian assistance since the ceasefire began. Meanwhile, what's sitting on the trucks in Egypt are 60,000 mobile homes, 200,000 tents and heavy machinery to clear rubble.
Over in Afghanistan, as millions continue to struggle with basic necessities from healthcare to clean water, International Committee of the Red Cross came out with figures of how much aid and efforts they've put in last year. Our Tamim Bahiz brings more on that from Kabul.
In 2024, nearly 1 million patients accessed vital healthcare services through 47 medical centers run by the Afghan Red Crescent Society, according to the International Committee of the Red Cross. Women and children made up 65% of those seeking care. The ICRC also reported that 300,000 routine vaccines were administered, while nearly 9,000 malnourished children received support through a nutrition program. Additionally, the organization provided cash assistance to tens of thousands of Afghans to meet their basic needs and supported farmers with agricultural tools, seeds, and fertilizers. In urban areas, over 1 million Afghans gained access to clean drinking water and improved electricity. However, the ICRC emphasized that despite these efforts, Afghans still face significant challenges in accessing basic necessities, including healthcare, food, and clean water. Tamim Bahiz, A News, Kabul, Afghanistan.
Talks to form Austria's first coalition government led by the far-right Freedom Party collapsed after negotiations with the Conservative People's Party had ground to a halt. The Eurosceptic, Russia-friendly FPO had been seeking to lead a government for the first time since it was founded in the 1950s under a leader who had been a prominent Nazi. The FPO came first in September's parliamentary election with around 29%, but was only tasked with forming a government last month once a centrist attempt to do so without it failed. The People's Party was its only potential coalition partner, as others said they would not work with FPO. The rise of right and far-right parties in Europe is reshaping the continent's political landscape. From economic anxieties to shifting social values, in the following report, we examine what's fueling its resurgence and what could it bring for the future of the EU.
As Western nations enter another election cycle in 2025, the most striking development compared to previous elections is the growing strength of far-right politicians. The European Parliament elections saw far-right parties secure their highest ever vote share, winning nearly a quarter of the seats and achieving significant successes in major countries such as France, Germany, and Italy. This trend extended beyond the European Parliament, influencing local and presidential elections in Germany, Austria, and Romania. The far-right's victory in local elections in Germany in 2023 marked the beginning of a broader surge across Europe. A look at Europe's political map highlights Italy, Sweden, Finland, Hungary, Germany, France, and the Netherlands as key centers of this shift. Far-right parties in these countries have rapidly gained public support, driven by more than just anti-immigrant policies or opposition to social norms. Their appeal is rooted in deeper economic, social, and cultural dynamics. One of the key drivers behind the far-right's rise is Europe's ongoing economic crisis and widening inequalities. Many voters feel that their concerns over job insecurity, rising living costs, and economic instability have been ignored by centrist and left-wing politicians. Far-right parties have capitalized on this by linking economic hardship to immigration, presenting national identity as a solution to financial struggles. Anti-immigrant sentiment remains a core pillar of populist movements, with far-right leaders amplifying the claim that migrants negatively impact national economies. Another factor fueling the far-right's rise is shifting attitudes towards gender issues. Right-wing parties have attracted more male than female voters by advocating for a return to traditional social structures. This appeal to family values has led to a resurgence of populist narratives around gender roles, with criticisms of women's rights and gender equality aligning with far-right rhetoric. Notably, far-right parties have gained traction among young voters, particularly first-time male voters. In Poland's 2023 election, nearly half of men aged 18 to 21 backed a far-right party, and a similar trend was observed in Portugal's March 2024 elections, where 1 in 4 voters under 25 supported the far-right Chega party.
The problem that we're facing in Europe is that there is a growing disavowalment, disconnection between the ruling elites that are no longer elites or just a political class, that has lesser and lesser quality and a lesser and lesser capacity of management, with crises popping up left, right, and center all over Europe, be it. So, of course, immigration comes in, but immigration oftentimes doesn't integrate, and those that integrate are not noticed. Only those that are noticeable are the ones that don't integrate. Look at the problems of security that are arising in Sweden. And, of course, that is making the far right in Sweden grow, as well as in Finland and in so many other countries. Unfortunately, the only way to do this is to have a stronger political class, stronger institutions, and an awareness in the media and in education to be able to teach people what the consequences of extremism are and where this can lead.
In Germany, 2024 surveys indicated rising support for the far-right Alternative for Deutschland among young men. Data from the Pew Research Center revealed that 26% of German men viewed the AfD favorably, compared to just 11% of women. This marked a 10-point increase since 2022, with youth unemployment and economic uncertainty seen as major contributors. AfD's vote share among under-24s increased by 11% compared to 2019, reflecting wider discontent. The rise of the far right is deepening ideological divisions in Europe. Prominent figures driving right-wing populism include Italy's Giorgia Meloni, France's Marine Le Pen, Hungary's Viktor Orbán, the Netherlands' Geert Wilders, and Poland's Jarosław Kaczynski. Their influence mirrors the populist right movement in the United States, led by Donald Trump, whose America First stance aligns with Europe's nationalist rhetoric of our people first. Both movements reject establishment politics and thrive on public discontent.
If we do not protect the system, what we are going to see is the parties are going to be questioned after the politicians, then it's going to be the institutions, government first, then the legislative, then the judicial, and then finally it's going to be the system. So people are going to be asking for authoritarian governments to fix the problems that democracies were not able to fix. And this is the beginning of the end.
The far right's growing influence poses challenges to the EU's political stability and core democratic values. Since its foundation, the EU has been built on human rights, democratic governance, and international cooperation. However, far-right parties increasingly view Brussels and EU institutions as adversaries, raising concerns about European unity. At the same time, criticism of the EU is not exclusive to the far right. Some left-wing movements also argue that EU bureaucracy undermines national decision-making, calling for reforms to improve transparency and accountability. If far right continues to gain ground, the EU could face internal divisions that challenge its long-term cohesion.
The Pakistan Navy's multinational exercise, Aman 2025, wrapped up in the North Arabian Sea. 60 nations took part in the drill in a bid to strengthen cooperation on maritime security.
Pakistan's Navy concluded exercise Aman 2025 after days of naval drills and strategic discussions in the North Arabian Sea. The exercise, which began last week, is held every 2 years to enhance maritime security and international cooperation. This year, 60 nations participated, including Bangladesh, China, Indonesia, Japan, Saudi Arabia, and the US. The Navy stated that the event demonstrated Pakistan's commitment to peace under the motto "Together for Peace." Chief of Army Staff General Asim Munir observed naval operations and maneuvers during the International Fleet Review on board Pakistan's ship Moawin. Commanding Officer PNS Moawin, Captain Humayun Yaqub, highlighted the exercise's expansion, noting it had grown from 28 nations in 2007 to 60 in 2025. The event featured warships, aircraft, and special forces, where participants engaged in strategic discussions on maritime security.
Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev said that if countries are economically dependent, they will face difficulty in defending their national interests. In an interview with the China Global Television Network, Aliyev said that economy is the foundation of everything.
Azerbaijan's growing influence on the global stage and its foreign policy strategy have attracted significant international attention in recent years. Speaking in an interview with China Global Television Network during the World Economic Forum in Davos, President Ilham Aliyev outlined the country's key achievements, diplomatic efforts, and future priorities. President Aliyev highlighted Azerbaijan's greatest success as the full restoration of its territorial integrity and sovereignty. He emphasized that all actions were taken in line with international law, the UN Charter, and Security Council resolutions.
So for almost 30 years, that was our national idea, and we mobilized all our efforts in order to achieve our goal and to restore justice. Unfortunately, international law norms and international organizations were not helpful because resolutions which were adopted by numerous international organizations just remained on paper. We had to resolve it ourselves and to restore justice ourselves. And this once again demonstrates that what really world needs now is full respect to international commitment.
Reflecting on Azerbaijan's economic progress since gaining independence, the president pointed to the country's financial stability and resilience.
With a very low rate of foreign debt vis-à-vis GDP, it's only 6.9%. Based on that, we initiated large-scale projects which created connectivity in the region, and we're well established in the region of Southern Caucasus and Caspian, where we belong to. And definitely we've been strongly defending our national interests, our lifestyle, our independent policy, and achieved a lot of successes. So I would say example of Azerbaijan is a country which is relatively new on international map, defending its national interests and establishing good contacts around the globe, demonstrates that when you have stability, when you have unity in your society, you can defend your interests.
President Aliyev also highlighted Azerbaijan's leadership on the global stage, recalling the country's 4-year chairmanship of the Non-Aligned Movement, the world's second-largest international body after the United Nations.
Definitely, our target was to position Azerbaijan on political and economic map of the world. And hosting a climatic conference, which unites almost 200 countries, was a big challenge, a big responsibility, and also a big success. And another demonstration of Azerbaijan's diversified foreign policy is that our nomination was supported by all the parties. Almost
Congratulations!
200, yes, almost 200 parties, I mean countries and international organizations, unanimously supported Azerbaijan's nomination. Prior to that, we successfully chaired for 4 years a non-aligned movement, which unites 120 countries and is second largest international institution after General Assembly. So this demonstrates that our policy, based on friendship, cooperation, non-interference in internal affairs of any country, really gains support on international arena, so we can be a host country for such a global international event.
Turning to Azerbaijan's relations with China, President Aliyev described last year's strategic partnership agreement as a significant milestone. He noted that cooperation between the two nations extends beyond economic ties, playing a crucial role in regional connectivity. Azerbaijan, he said, has modernized its infrastructure along the Middle Corridor, a key transport route linking Asia and Europe.
Yes, definitely it provides alternative and it provides opportunities for business, because Azerbaijan's position on Middle Corridor is not just to be a transit country and to get more fees from transit. Our target is to build facilities en route in Azerbaijan to help private sector to take advantage of that. And of course, since that panel which you referred to, a lot have happened in this area, including in relationship between China and Azerbaijan, as I already said, about strategic partnership. But at the same time, Azerbaijan's infrastructure of Middle Corridor, Azerbaijani segment, was upgraded. At the moment, we see that already upgraded infrastructure will not be enough in the coming 3-5 years.
Yes, I see you always have new goals.
Yeah, exactly. Because our target was to have a handling capacity in our trade seaport of 15 million tons, and that would have been enough for decades. But now we expect 25 million tons within probably 5-6 years. So what we're doing at the moment, we are financing expansion of our trade seaport, expansion of our railroad infrastructure. We know that there are connectivity projects in Central Asia, also largely financed by Chinese government. Another routes towards the Caspian, that means towards Azerbaijan, so we must be absolutely prepared for that. And I'm sure that One Belt, One Road initiative of President Xi Jinping will create additional opportunities for all the countries. And again, it is connectivity, it is business opportunity, and it is stability and security, because we all become interdependent. And we have important infrastructure project which unites us, and this is a good environment for addressing different types of issues between countries on bilateral and multilateral track.
Concluding his remarks, President Aliyev stressed that leadership requires fairness and honesty, underscoring the importance of trust between a leader and their people.
The trial of Vardanyan in Azerbaijan is drawing international attention as he faces serious charges linked to terrorism and war crimes. Ukrainian lawmakers highlighted his alleged ties to the Kremlin.
The trial against Vardanyan, an Armenian citizen accused of torture, mercenary activities, war crimes, terrorism, and financing terrorism, is underway in Azerbaijan. He is alleged to have funded and organized illegal armed groups in Karabakh. Vardanyan's controversial background extends beyond these charges. The Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project exposed his role in moving billions through offshore accounts via his company, Troika Dialogue, benefiting Russian oligarchs and state-linked entities. He renounced his Russian citizenship in 2022 to evade Western sanctions, but was sanctioned by Ukraine for supporting the Russian occupation army. His trial in Azerbaijan has reignited discussions among Ukrainian lawmakers about his international criminal activities. Yuri Kamelchuk, an MP from the Servant of the People Party, states in videos on his personal accounts that Vardanyan is completely discredited.
If he weren't in custody in Azerbaijan, he should be delivered to Ukraine or Lithuania, for example. By the way, the Mirot Fore's website states, subject to immediate detention and transfer to law enforcement agencies of Ukraine or NATO countries.
Mykola Halushko, Kamelchuk's party colleague, wrote on Facebook that Vardanyan is twice an enemy of Ukraine and Putin's Russian puppet and wallet. Halushko was supported by his colleague Alexander Fedienko, who highlighted Vardanyan's close ties with Putin.
Цей діяч, відомий достатньо величезною своєю близькістю до Путіна, став
Vardanyan is a figure known for his closeness to Putin, who became a symbol of financial support for Russian aggression. Since 2019, his name has appeared in investigations and sanctions lists of the USA, EU and Ukraine.
Tatiana Grishenko, who is also a member of Ukrainian parliament, in her Facebook post emphasized that she hopes the Azerbaijani court will put an end to his career as a hero of the Kremlin's fakes. Ukraine, the USA, the EU have already imposed sanctions against him. Vardanyan relocated to Karabakh in 2022, assuming the role of state minister in the so-called unrecognized, self-proclaimed Nagorno-Karabakh Republic. Vardanyan's arrest on September 27, 2023, marked a turning point. Azerbaijani forces detained him while he attempted to cross into Armenia, citing substantial evidence of his involvement in terrorism and other crimes.
Now for an update to our top story, the Trump-Putin phone call. White House press secretary said that the U.S. president is willing to end the war in Ukraine as soon as possible, and that Trump strongly believes that's possible through extensive negotiations.
I have a couple of updates for you this morning, or this afternoon. As you know, this morning, the president spoke to President Putin of Russia. They spoke at length, and the president released a statement following that conversation in great detail. I can also confirm that the president just recently got off the phone with President Zelensky of Ukraine. His truth is as follows. I just spoke to President Zelensky of Ukraine. The conversation went very well. He, like President Putin, wants to make peace. We discussed a variety of topics having to do with the war, but mostly the meeting that is being set up on Friday in Munich, where Vice President J.D. Vance and Secretary of State Marco Rubio will lead the delegation. I am hopeful that the results of that meeting will be positive. It is time to stop this ridiculous war where there has been massive and totally unnecessary death and destruction. God bless the people of Russia and Ukraine. I myself just spoke to the president about these calls, and he told me to tell all of you they were very good calls, they were very positive, and the administration is wholeheartedly committed to a peace deal to end once and for all the Russia-Ukraine war.
Georgia's prime minister is in Dubai at the World Government Summit trying to secure foreign investments. Nina Nikolaishvili reports from Tbilisi.
Georgian Prime Minister Irakli Kobakhidze has secured a major $6 billion investment with the United Arab Emirates-based developers while strengthening bilateral diplomatic and economic ties with Kuwait. At the World Government Summit in Dubai, Kobakhidze met with Sheikh, Prime Minister, Vice President and ruler of Dubai. Talks focused on a memorandum signed with EMAEAR Properties and Eagle Hills outlining large-scale development projects in Tbilisi, Batumi and Konya. The investment aims to enhance Georgia's urban infrastructure and economic prospects. The meeting has also covered ongoing United Arab Emirates investments, including Tbilisi Dry Port project funded by Abu Dhabi Ports Group. The project is expected to strengthen Georgia's role as a regional trade hub. Both sides discussed expanding cooperation in tourism, energy and trade. In a separate meeting, Kobakhidze held talks with the Kuwaiti Prime Minister to explore bilateral cooperation in real estate, tourism and energy. Both leaders extended official invitations to visit each other countries, signaling the commitment to deepening ties. This engagement highlights Georgia's strategic efforts to position itself as a key economic bridge between West and it, leveraging foreign investments and diplomatic partnerships to drive national development. I am Nina Nikolaishvili reporting from Tbilisi, News.
Kazakhstan is increasing its gas exports to China following a deal signed between PetroChina and Kazakhgas, the country's national gas operator. The agreement was finalized at the Kazakhstan-China Business Summit in Astana. Our Fariza Kalimurzina brings more on that.
Kazakhstan's national gas operator Kazakhgas has reached an agreement with PetroChina to expand gas exports to China this year. The deal was signed by Kazakhgas CEO Sanjar Jarkeshev and PetroChina International's executive chair during a Kazakhstan-China business summit in Astana. According to the agreement, Kazakhstan will increase its gas supply to China, although specific timelines for the expanded exports haven't been disclosed. Currently, Kazakhstan supplies approximately 4 billion cubic meters of gas to China annually under an agreement signed in 2022, which runs through 2026. Meanwhile, Kazakhstan's domestic gas consumption stands at around 21 billion cubic meters per year. The move follows earlier negotiations between Kazakhgas and Chinese officials, with Jarkeshev previously stating that increased exports could help Kazakhstan balance its energy sector by offsetting lower domestic gas prices, which are subsidized by the government. Last October, he told Bloomberg that Kazakhstan was exploring the construction of an additional pipeline to facilitate increased supplies. Meanwhile, experts suggest that Kazakhstan will face strong competition from regional gas exporters, including Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, Russia. Since 2022, Russia's pivot to China has intensified competition in the market as Moscow looks to replace lost European gas buyers. The timing of the agreement is also notable, coming just a day after China escalated its trade tensions with the administration of US President Donald Trump by imposing retaliatory tariffs on American energy imports. Shortly after, a large Chinese business delegation arrived in Kazakhstan for negotiations, underscoring the growing importance of Kazakh gas to China's energy security. As China's energy demand continues to rise, the latest deal highlights that Kazakhstan's strategic role in supplying gas to one of the world's largest energy consumers. From Almaty, Kazakhstan, Fariza Kalimurzina, A-News.
Over in Turkey, tourists can now step back in time at the Roman bath courtyard of the ancient city Stratonikeia, known as the City of Gladiators, after the columns found during archaeological excavations have been restored to their original positions at this UNESCO World Heritage Site.
Stratonikeia, one of the largest marble cities in the world, has been a focal point for archaeological research since excavations began in 1977. The city, with its rich history spanning from the Hellenistic, Roman and Byzantine eras to the Medes, Beylik, Ottoman and Republic periods, continues to reveal new findings year after year. Professor Bilal Saud, head of the Stratonikeia excavation team, shared the progress made at the site.
We have been conducting archaeological digs, restorations and surveys on a variety of ancient structures, including the Roman bath complex. The recent work in the Roman bath area focuses on the palaestra, or the sports area, which has been excavated in detail over the last 2 years. In the recent excavations, the team uncovered 36 columns from the bathhouse's courtyard. Last year, we completed the excavation of the columns and all associated materials. With the intact materials from these columns, we've successfully reconstructed them, placing their upper structures back in place.
Visitors to the site will now be able to walk through and admire the complete Roman-era columns, along with their decorative elements, offering a glimpse into the past. The project has unveiled layers of history, spanning from the 1st to the 7th century AD, reflecting various additions and alterations to the structure over time. This restoration effort is part of the Heritage for Future project, which aims to protect and preserve Turkey's ancient treasures for future generations.
Well, that's all we have for you for now. Thank you for watching and do stay tuned to A News.